did a good enough job? Did we really think, and I like I said, I understand the circumstances, but did we think that a Gardner Minshew versus Patrick Mahomes battle would come down to a one score, a one touchdown win? But I think the Chiefs continue to show that they can win in a lot of different ways. And the way that they're winning right now is with Kareem Hunt and leading into the run game. And I thought it was good to see Travis Kelce continuing to have production, and it was a 1-2 punch. And I think as DeAndre Hopkins, now he had 23 snaps in this game, continues to get more integrated into the offense, you're going to see the things that we're used to from Patrick Mahomes, where spreading the football around, and sometimes it's one hero, sometimes it's another hero, and it doesn't really matter because in the end they get the win.
Was that about what you expected from DeAndre Hopkins? I mean, he gets his first target on the first drive of the game, the first third down. It was a clean route. He obviously caught it. It was more of a possession catch, if you want to call it that. Wasn't worried about turning upfield. But, hey, on third down, you're past the marker, just catch the ball and go down. That's exactly what he did. So in his 2 catches for this game, one of them setting up a field goal right before halftime, one of them, of course, moving the sticks on the first drive of the game. Was that kind of in your wheelhouse of what you thought he would be, or maybe a little bit more, or maybe a little bit less?
I thought the snaps were where I figured they would be. I was thinking somewhere between 15 to 25-ish, which it fell in that, a little bit closer to 25 than 15. And I think he did a good job, and the Chiefs were happy with what he was able to do. It would have been nice to get him in earlier, right, because then he would have had more snaps in this game. But they get him when they get him. He became available, and I think you could tell that he's juiced up to be here. And one of the things Andy Reid said after the game and a little bit this week is that DeAndre was sort of campaigning to stay in or be put in, and more and more and more. And so you like that. You like that energy from a 32-year-old. I think he really sees the opportunity to go and win a championship, which you like because he's extremely talented when he's motivated, and I think he certainly is now. I also thought, Jack, that this was a major game for the defense and a little bit of a statement. You wouldn't have thought, again, that's why we watch the games, like you wouldn't have thought the Chiefs defense could make a statement against the Raiders. They allowed points in the opening drive. I believe it was the 5th time this year. But everything else but the opening drive, they seem to be the best defense in the league. And they were put in an awful position by Patrick Mahomes, throws the interception, and only got a couple yards to go. You know, I don't care if you're Las Vegas or even a worse team in the NFL, right? Like, it's still 3 yards to go. And to stand up the Raiders offense at that point where, let's say they score, or let's say they even decide to kick a field goal there. I don't know if you know exactly how the game goes, but you look at that stand, and once they were able to accomplish that, in my opinion, the game was over. I don't think there was any coming back or any miracle happening for the Raiders.
Yeah, that to me was what ended the game. Yeah. I mean, when the Raiders have all the momentum, Wanya Morris is getting abused on one drive. He's getting penalized, back-to-back plays. And then Patrick Mahomes has his arm hit. Ball flutters up in the air. Raiders pick it off, nearly return it for a touchdown.
Right.
But it puts the defense in a spot where, I mean, they just came off the field, right? So it's not like they've had 6, 7, 8 minutes to rest up and then go out there and have a goal line stand. They had just been out there. Mm-hmm. And not only was it a goal line stand, the Raiders got -5 yards on the play.
Which was huge because you get the ball back and you have some room to work.
A little breathing room,
right.
Yes.
With all the holding calls, you didn't want to give a free 2 away to the Raiders, so I thought that was tremendous. Yeah.
Exactly. And it really comes down to the fact that this defense doesn't let anybody run over them anymore. No. It doesn't matter if you're an elite running back or you're somebody like an Alexander Madison, who's not a bad running back, but he had 14 carries for 15 yards. When you're 3 yards out, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to just punch it in. You want to play bully ball and run up the middle, and they tried 3 times, and the Chiefs were prepared for it every single time, and the time they go to throw, they already surround Gardner Minshew in a matter of seconds. And that's really, to me, Pete, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, why they can be 7-0. I mean, no team in football, in my opinion, other than the Chiefs, could have their quarterback throwing more interceptions than touchdowns, right, and yet here they are at 7-0.
Yeah, I actually asked Patrick Mahomes about this today, just this idea that the defense is so damn good, it doesn't make you be a little bit more conservative. And he pushed back on conservative, but he said it once you have a lead, it changes the way that you operate. You're not pushing, because you know you can punt the football, not put the ball in danger, in a dangerous position to be intercepted, something like that. And now this particular interception was deflected, so you kind of give him some grace there. But it allows you some wiggle room. It allows you to play free, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out because you're probably getting the ball back without any points being scored. And so it's a complete team. I think you could argue, hey, there are some weeks where they're winning, quote-unquote, ugly, but who cares? Like, who cares? They're still winning the game, and really that's all that matters. I remember, like, last year, because I know that, like, this team obviously is under the Kansas City microscope. Everybody loves to watch these Chiefs, and everyone hopes that they are able to win the Super Bowl again. But I remember last year where fans would be like, well, we don't have enough at receiver. Like, who's the receiver? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And, like, this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, like, all the way up to them winning the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they're winning games, to me, the result is the result. And I know that, should they stay healthy now, which has been a problem each and every week. It seems like another guy's going down, but you assume they stay healthy. There's only reinforcements to come, right? Like Isaiah Pacheco should be at least practicing, we would think, in the next month at some point.
Yeah.
Same thing with Charles Omenihu. Who knows when they actually take the field? And then eventually when you get to the postseason, we're expecting Hollywood Brown to have some availability there. So they're winning games. They're finding a way to do it. And like we all know, at the end of the year, Patrick Mahomes is going to have more touchdowns than interceptions. I'm not jinxing anything here by saying that, so who cares?
You bring up reinforcements, and we know Charles Omenihu is getting closer. I believe they said that today at the press conference. Isaiah Pacheco, as you brought up, getting closer. And then they go out and make a move to bring in an edge rusher in Josh Uche, a speed rusher, so kind of a different look for that defensive line. Was that a move that caught you off guard? Because the defensive line is not an issue for this team, but they go out there and strengthen it, add depth, and a guy who, can get in the backfield more often than not. He's not going to be in the three-point stance. He's going to try to go around a lot of guys using his speed. He's not the biggest guy out there, but 2 years ago, an 11.5 sack season when he was paired up with Matthew Judon. So you think focus is going to be on Chris Jones, focus is going to be on George Karlaftis. Might be an opportunity for him to really break out again.
Well, I think Brett Veach has his guys that he liked coming out. And he's always monitoring and seeing their availability. And when teams end up like the New England Patriots, where the organization clearly knows, okay, like this is probably a quote-unquote rebuilding year, guys become available. And his role had diminished, Uche, in New England. And like I said, this was someone that the Chiefs had liked coming out of Michigan. And I think, and I'm not saying necessarily this was causation, but I think when Mike Dana goes down for 2 weeks and you're left with Felix, I thought Felix was okay, these past couple weeks. But I think you're also seeing, well, now what if Felix goes down, right? Like now you're like, is the pass rush enough? Or, in that scenario, would they just load up on Jones and you're left thinking, okay, are we ever going to get pressure on the quarterback? And so they go in and get a pass rusher. And I thought it was a pass rusher, too, that maybe doesn't exist on this current iteration of the team, this like speed demon where I'm thinking 3rd and long, you freaking unleash this guy with Chris Jones on the field and he's got one-on-one and he's to the quarterback in 3 seconds. How you picking up 10, 12 yards? And so I like the move. It was a depth move for sure. We'll see how many snaps he gets in this initial game. And much like Hopkins, as the same things I was saying where, man, he's so excited to be here because now you have an opportunity. You blink and you go from Hopkins' situation was the Tennessee Titans. They ain't going anywhere. Patriots, they're winning a game here and there. They somehow beat the Jets. If you look at the box score, it doesn't make any sense. We're not talking about the Jets, but they're not going anywhere this year. Now these guys are taken from those situations and put into an opportunity to like make do something that has never been accomplished before. Be part of the 3-peat team. And like you're etched right now in history, and so it is a black and white, one situation to another. And I think both guys are talented and both guys are motivated, and you feel a little bit better about the defensive line room. Now, I'm with you, and I'm with a lot of fans in this sense. I was just making fun of the idea about them complaining about a wide receiver before, but if you look at the weaknesses of this team, I think the biggest thing that you think of right now is the left side of the offensive line, and there are still a couple days away from the trade deadline. I know the cornerback position comes up. I feel a little bit better about this team and this coaching staff being able to coach up these corners. I do wonder if there is something in the mix for the left tackle position. But the cool thing about it, and I'll put a bow on this because I know I've been talking a lot here, Jack, I think it's awesome to see that even though this team is undefeated and winning games, and like you might say, oh, the left side of the offensive line is a weakness. No, there's another way that we can get better as well, and they don't hesitate to go and do that.
Yeah, I think the interesting part about going out and strengthening your roster is it's not as simple as you're weak there, go find a guy to replace that weakness. Sometimes it's strengthening your strengths out there. And we know that the reason this defense is so good is because they can generate pressure, at least from one side of the line of scrimmage. When you have Chris Jones and George Karlaftis, Omenihu's going to be coming back. But why can't you go out there and make this a rotational group where you're bringing in guys that are fresh, they're going to have tons of energy, there's different type of looks, different type of stunts that offensive lines are going to have to worry about, and then it makes it easier on somebody like Joshua Williams or Najee Johnson or Chris Roland Wallace, because if you're getting to the quarterback, as you brought up, in 3 seconds, right, in a big third down, they're not covering 20, 25 yards down the field. They can keep stuff in front of them, and that's where they can use their length and be able to knock passes away, be, clean in coverage down the field. But, when you look at now the weaknesses of this defense, it probably gets pointed to that number 2 cornerback position. Joshua Williams, in my opinion, didn't look that good on Sunday, but is that more so about just getting back into the swing of things, or is this what we're going to come to expect?
Well, that's why I put it second past the left side protection, because like when you add an edge rusher like this, it makes things easier for the cornerback position, right? Like defense is such an 11-man, they say 111, the players, they love to say that, but it's true. Like if you could have the best cornerbacks in the world. I mean, this is the NFL. If your front isn't good, it really doesn't matter, right? Like if the quarterback has 10 seconds, they're going to find the open receiver eventually. And so, you think about the back end, and there may be a weakness there while Jalen Watson is out and finding a way to come back, and they're on the fly identifying, okay, who's going to be the best man to replace, what was Jalen Watson. I think they think it's Najee Johnson, but unfortunately he goes down with a concussion early in the game, and so you're a little bit weak there. But again, let's say Nazee's thrown in, and he does have some growing pains here because this is now more of a feature role than he's ever had before in his short NFL career. You have the pressure on the quarterback, and it just makes things a lot easier for that back end. And so I like the move, and like I said, I think the biggest weakness right now, if I'm trying to nitpick the undefeated Chiefs, is the left tackle position. But hey, hard for me to argue with Andy Reid. Andy Reid's stance on this has been, we like these guys. They got a lot of upside in so many words, and they're young, and we're going to give them time. And hell, you know what? If the Chiefs can manage that and win in the process, like all these championship teams, you didn't necessarily have elite left tackle play. So you're coaching these guys up, or trying to coach them up to be average, slightly above average, which is what they won their championships with. So I think it's manageable, and you like that they're undefeated.
Last one I want to ask you before we get to Ron Kopp, the lead analyst at Arrowhead Pride, get his thoughts on the Raiders and look ahead to Tampa Bay on Monday Night Football. Wanye Morris, as you brought up, that has been the weakness of this offensive line. The interior has been fantastic with Tooney, Humphrey, and Smith. I think for the most part, Jawan Taylor has been an improvement from what we saw early on last year. Mm-hmm. But Wanye Morris coming off a performance where, maybe it was just the penalties and getting blown up on a few plays that it sticks with fans. But I guess for a lot of people out there, is it as bad as people think it is? Or is this more so of he's been good for the majority of the game, but when he screws up, when he gets exposed, it can be catastrophic, where you've got a back-to-back holding calls. You get, blitzed, or you just have basically a bull rush and you get toppled over. Is it just a few plays here and there where he's struggling, or is this, no, it's pretty continuous throughout the game that he's struggling?
I mean, it's bad performances because you're judged. It's a little bit unfair in a sense, because you can drop a pass as a receiver and, you can still have an 8-for-9 game and be fine, where you got a couple bad plays as an offensive lineman. Now you stick out like a sore thumb. And I think the problem in this particular game for me, and I think a lot of fans felt this too, is if you just play clean football, you're beating the Raiders. And so you get these back-to-back offensive line penalties. You get a situation where it looked like Morris let the guy through, and Mahomes got a little banged up. Mahomes is actually on the injury report this week. Full practice. No one worry here, but he's listed as an ankle. He wasn't listed, and so I think it's those moments that stick out. I think like I don't make this call, right? I'm just a reporter. I just talk about the team. And so if they continue to trust him, I asked Andy Reid today, you sticking with Wanye? And he said, yeah. I mean, I think they feel like he can get to a point where he can be serviceable. And so we'll see. We'll see if that is the case. But, so far that position hasn't cost them a game. And, we'll see if that eventually does. But right now they're okay.
We'll definitely get Ron Kopp's thoughts on the left tackle position, if it should be Wanye Morris, if it should be Kingsley Suamataia, or if it should be somebody on another team right now. The Chiefs could go out there and acquire. We'll take our first break of the show. When we come back, Ron Kopp joins us on the Arrowhead Pride Radio Show on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
While you're sleeping after the game, Arrowhead Pride's lead analyst Ron Kopp is in the lab. Now he joins Arrowhead Pride Radio.
Welcome back to Arrowhead Pride Radio on Sports Radio 810 WHB. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. That's Pete Sweeney, Kyle Collier producing this thing. And we are brought to you by Heartland Financial and Mortgage. Check them out at hmfkc.com. Ron, I got to have a first question about this offensive line, more specifically Wanya Morris. The Chiefs are going to be sticking with him, not going to Kingsley Suamataia after that performance against the Raiders. How does that sit with you? Is Wanya the guy that should be at left tackle moving forward, or do the Chiefs need to look themselves in the mirror and maybe go back to the rookie that they originally started the year with?
Well, in this situation, I feel like we just have to trust that what the Chiefs are seeing from, behind closed doors in terms of the comparison between Wanya and Kingsley, in terms of Kingsley development as a very young player right now, and the fact that Wanya just has such a bigger sample size to look at and see that he's played solid tackle for this team and in college. I will say he's been solid this year. I was impressed with Wanya leading up to this game. Obviously, it's a question worth asking after a Kingsley Suamataia type performance, right? That was reminiscent of week 2, at times, and that's just where you just have to trust that they believe that Kingsley. Because it's one game that each of them have had those kind of shaky things. Wanya just has the bigger sample size. So we just have to trust that Coach Reed and the staff understand and know which guy's the best. And Wanya just seems solid to me right now. The way he was playing before this game, I was definitely in favor of him starting the rest of the season, and still am, for sure.
Ron, let's stick with the offense and talk about DeAndre Hopkins and the limited number of snaps that he saw. Now, in your review of this, what do you foresee this will mean for the Chiefs' offense moving forward?
Well, yeah, it just gives them someone that, can get to the middle of the field, win at the second level in the short area of the field too quickly, right? Off line of scrimmage quickly, beat man coverage quickly, or find that zone window quickly. The zone part is something that Rashee Rice was very underrated at, right? He was a playmaker. He can get the ball in his hands and run, but man, he was very good at. And it was real early on that we all saw it. Mahomes started, trusting him in zone windows and going to him. DeAndre brings that because they needed somebody, opposite of Kelsey on the other side of the field where he's going to be doing that. And then both of them are just going to have more and more opportunities because Worthy is just pushing it deep. So I really feel like Hopkins is just going to have so many opportunities, whether it's one-on-one coverage, whether it's just kind of the backside of a play, right? The strong side features Kelsey and Worthy. That's kind of the play side call. Mahomes looks that way, maybe doesn't like it for a second. Backside, he knows Hopkins is going to win that one-on-one. That's where he fits in, and it's just going to only it's just going to go up with his snap count. Like we're going to see the best of it maybe this week. With this coverage coming in, I really think so.
I want to just follow up with that, and I agree with you completely because we already saw 23 snaps, which is impressive because a lot of people come into this offense and it takes a while for them to get any snaps. I even think about guys that have been here since training camp on that are rookies or second-year players and not able to get enough of the playbook, absorb enough of the playbook to be on the field. So now we saw 23 the first game. I'm thinking 30-plus, 35, 40 for the second game. When you talk about what the Chiefs can do on the ground, when you talk about how they can operate in the intermediate, don't you agree that Monday night is the night we're going to see an Xavier Worthy 80, 90-yard bomb? I feel like that opportunity is going to be open.
Well, I definitely agree, and it's to a larger point that I really feel like this is, and it's no disrespect to the Buccaneers as a team. I think they're a really good team. They just are very banged up in the secondary, specifically at the corner position. And I really feel like this is going to be a Patrick Mahomes kind of statement game. Maybe get himself back in the MVP, race or consideration. I mean, shoot, if the team's going to be, 7-0 and further undefeated, I mean, at some point, if he puts a string of games together, he's going to be back as kind of maybe the favorite. Just these interceptions have obviously drug his campaign down. But no, I see that happening Monday night for sure, just because. Another part of it is that the Buccaneers, their strength of the defense is up front. Vita Vea is going to, give them a hard time maybe than other teams, stuffing the run, maybe not letting things get going on the ground. They might need Mahomes to kind of, really pass a lot just to avoid kind of the strength of the Bucs defense and kind of play into their weakness right now. So I'd love to see D-Hop snaps up, Xavier Worthy's usage. and Mahomes just be aggressive because again, you're playing with against inexperienced corners, maybe some backup corners. Maybe test them with one-on-one balls to Hopkins or just launching it deep to Worthy and letting him try to make a play.
We're talking with Ron Kopp, lead analyst of Arrowhead Pride. Ron, Pete and I were talking about this in the opening segment about having a quarterback who's got more interceptions than touchdowns, yet the team is still undefeated. Is there anybody out there right now in the NFL that if their quarterback had more interceptions than touchdowns, that they could be playing this well still, being 7-0 or 6-1? Is there anybody that comes to mind that could overcome that type of play?
I mean, I'm not sure because, Mahomes, that's the thing. A lot of the interceptions this year, there have been some really bad ones. It's not even interception luck. There have been some ugly throws. This last game, obviously, it was more of interception luck. But no, it does speak to maybe the team's reliance on the run game this year as well, right? Not maybe Mahomes throwing as many touchdowns. And then the defense, obviously. It just speaks to this team really just being as well-rounded as it's ever been around Mahomes, and that's why he has that margin for error to maybe not be as effective and still win. This defense is it's arguable. Jalen Watson's injury is going to change things, but at some points this season it felt like they were playing more dominantly than last year because that run defense has really been super stout. So this defense is just making things easier for the offense to have a margin for error, and now this offense is getting into rhythm, man, and I think we're going to see it come to fruition on Monday night.
All right, Ron, be a teacher, a professor here. Grade the Josh Uche acquisition and tell us what you think.
Man, I don't know what the grading scale is, but I'll give it a freaking A+. I don't know how what else do you need to see from a contender to just a Chiefs defense that's already been so good this year, that's already been chaotic, coming after quarterbacks with different, pass rush looks, and they just sprinkled on a cherry on top for no risk at all, right? Very low compensation. A guy that seems to be, a speed rusher with a deep bag of tricks, someone that really you can put on one-on-one against an offensive tackle, let Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Turk Wharton maybe take up the attention or however it works. He's going to get one-on-ones, and he's a guy that can really take advantage of that. These last few years, man, he's been with the Patriots where when have they ever had a lead where he can just get after the quarterback, pin his ears back? He is really – I could not believe the compensation for him. I think he's a really underrated player. And I'm really excited for Stags to get him going because I do think the one thing this defense could need, obviously outside of corner, I would say, is just someone, again, that can win one-on-one off the edge when the attention's on Chris Jones.
Yeah, you mentioned corner, and I want to continue with the defense there, right? So you have Najee Johnson, who's the backup of Jalen Watson here. They wanted to really give him the first crack, and he goes down early in this game. How important is that he gets through the concussion protocol for Monday night based upon what you saw after he went down in this game?
Yeah, Joshua Williams, again, I think he's someone that has played before, so it's definitely, I think nice to feel that way that, hey, someone that's played in the system, played important games for the system. But man, it's behind him, it's just Christian Roland Wallace, who I know Andy mentioned him as, stepping up. But he has really only played that nickel position. He really hasn't played that outside corner position for the regular season Chiefs, at least. And so you don't know what you get. You got Keith Taylor maybe coming up again, possibly. He came up before. But no, I really think it's important. Obviously, Najee gets out of that because Joshua Williams is a good player, but there's just not a lot of depth, or an experienced player, I should say, but an inconsistent player, and that's why they need as much depth as possible. So yeah, if he's hot, you keep him in. They've done that before, where it's kind of at halftime they switch out the corners, right? First half, second half. They can't really do that if they have no one behind him. So yeah, it's important for sure.
Do you feel like Brett Veach is done making moves? And if they're not, what position do you see them attacking?
Oh, cornerback definitely comes to mind, right? I definitely think, I think there's some, thought that maybe they'd go get another receiver. I feel like that would be a little overkill at this point. Not that, it wouldn't be, nice to have or anything, but I think they got what they needed in D-Hop in the true number one. They didn't just get another guy. They went and got, again, I think D-Hop was really underrated, man, coming into this year, maybe the injury and just where he was. So I don't know if they need to make another move. And honestly, I don't know if they can, after the Uche trade. But I really like the Uche trade, man. I really feel like if you're not going to be able to get a corner, maybe that was the trade-off, right? You know, not trading a corner, trading for a corner, but trading for a edge rusher instead to boost the pass defense. That was a really good scenario. Just get a guy that can really win with speed and you know, get into the pocket.
It's the Chiefs and Bucks, Ron, on Monday night. And you want to say Super Bowl rematch, but these two teams are very, very different at this stage than what they were. What do you foresee in this matchup? How do the Chiefs, do you think, get to Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, no, and I do think the Chiefs defense will, you know, have a tough challenge. You know, the Buccaneers offense this year, you know, has been very explosive, but obviously, you know, they're dealing with these injuries to their top two receivers, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Godwin out for the season. You know, Evans, you know, could come back. We'll see. But that's the thing. You know, Baker's played good football this year. It's a good scheme. You know, I think they do a good job with, you know, getting to the tight ends off play action and really setting things up. So it's a challenge for the Chiefs defense. You know, I think it's a legit offense. And even if the Buccaneers do score some points, man, I really am just going to come back to the fact that I think Mahomes makes a statement this game. I think the Chiefs make a statement this game. D-Hop makes a statement this game. Kelsey, you know, anybody in the offense. I really feel like it could be, you know, a huge game for the offense, a lot of scoring going on. So, you know, yeah, I picked the Chiefs to score in the 40s. I'm just going to do that. You know, I'm feeling 41-21 was my prediction, Pete.
Okay.
All right. Well, Ron, thanks so much for your time as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yes, sir. Appreciate y'all.
Ron is very bullish on
I was going to say,
Chiefs-Bucks matchup.
I was just about to ask score prediction, but he did it for me.
Yeah.
40 points. Is that something you believe is attainable, even with all the guys that are banged up and out?
Yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins, he said, going to make an impact statement. Travis Kelce said pretty much all these skill position players in the offense, this is going to be their statement game on Monday Night Football.
40 seems like a lot to me. Now, that doesn't mean that, like, I don't think Kansas City can't dominate this matchup. I think where that energy from Ron is coming from, and he alluded to it in the interview there, is Jamel Dean being on IR and the backup not being so great, and the opportunity potentially to hit an Xavier Worthy or a Justin Watson downfield for those chunk gains and being able to put points on the board. Now, the reason why I wouldn't go as far as 40 points is because the Chiefs, as we alluded to a little bit earlier, are operating a little differently now, where if they have a 14-point lead, it seems like Andy Reid is really comfortable with giving, let's say, a drive as 10 plays. Kareem Hunt, 7 of those plays for runs, and they should be that way, right? Like, in the theory of what the 2024 Chiefs are, again, we're just shooting the you-know-what right now, but like let's say they have a 17-point lead and you have this defense. Is it worth risking throwing the ball downfield and having an interception like you saw last week and giving the other team life? And so I think based on their MO, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around this particular team right now. Maybe it's different when Hollywood Brown comes back in the playoffs, but this particular team, it's just hard for me to ever think they're going to get to 40. I do think they can dominate this matchup, though.
The really good spot that this Chiefs team is in is think about how perfect the other team has to play.
Yeah.
You have to get out to a hot start, which last week the Raiders did. They had an opening drive touchdown, I believe it was 80 yards, but you have to keep your foot on the gas because if this team gets clicking offensively, they get healthier, and they build, as you said, a 17-point lead, a 10-point lead. How hard is it to overcome that deficit against this type of defense, and especially at Arrowhead Stadium? So that's the exciting part about dreaming for the postseason, again, and trying to make this a three-peat, is if you're game planning for Kansas City, whether you're Baltimore, you're Buffalo, you're Houston, you can't really trail by double digits at any point because this defense just has the ability to step on your throat and end the game.
Yeah, it's just a different mentality. Like, when you had the Tyreek Hill Chiefs and the defense wasn't as good, yeah, you were trying to score as much as you possibly could. It wasn't uncommon for 3rd and short for you to see a pass to Tyreek Hill 18 to 20 yards down the field. Now, there were some weeks where they were putting up big numbers. I think one of those teams was averaging 30, 35 points a game. You don't need that anymore, and you don't need to play like that. If you're up 10 points and you have 3rd and short to go, there's no reason to risk it, right? Like, and I'm not even saying, oh, it needs to be Hunt every time. These short intermediate passes that we talk about that, before he went down, Rashee Rice was killing. Now you have DeAndre Hopkins in that spot. Now you have Travis Kelce against, especially these zone looks. Kelce kills, right? If you do get that. And so I think it's just a different built team, but the results, obviously, because Patrick Mahomes has never been 7-0 in his career before this point, 6-0 even. So every week is now record ground. This particular team, the way it's built, might be the most efficient, even considering those Legion of Zoom Chiefs, whatever you want to call them.
I think you look at a lot of teams in the NFL and you say that they don't really know what their identity is. They don't know who they are, and they try to emulate a lot of other teams out there.
That's a hot media question, Jack. When we're out there, we love asking about identity.
Identity. And this team knows, hey, we have talent offensively, but we're not a 35 points per game offense. If they believe that, I think they already would have had a handful of losses. I think they are totally fine playing methodical football, slowing down the pace, having 12, 13, 14 play drives, and win games with their defense, where everybody's complaining about, this offense isn't as good. They don't light up the scoreboard. They didn't light up the scoreboard last year, and yet it resulted in another Super Bowl championship.
And that's why, even though they're not playing that way, Xavier Worthy's health is paramount because it keeps the defense honest. If they're going to win that way and primarily play that football where it's power and they're living in that intermediate, you need the constant threat of, don't stack the box, don't play up because we're going to burn you for it. And so every once in a while, you do need that shot to Worthy. And there just isn't a player on this current roster like him. And so even if he finishes, there have been some bad finishes. I know some of you Worthy fantasy owners don't love it, but even if he finishes the game 2 catches, 31, his presence is just so important for how this team is currently built and winning.
All right, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we got some mailbag questions to answer. We got Pete's 3 things to watch heading into Monday Night Football against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So if you want to get that question in, use our text line at 913-912-4810. That's 913-912-4810. Or look for Pete's tweet or Arrowhead Pride's tweet. You are listening to Arrowhead Pride Radio on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Enjoying the show so far? Now it's time to get you involved. Text in your comments or questions to 913-912-4810, and we'll read and talk about it right now.
Welcome back to Arrowhead Pride Radio, brought to you by Heartland Financial and Mortgage. Check them out at hfmkc.com. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. That's Pete Sweeney. Kyle Collier producing. A big thank you to Ron Kopp, who joins us every single week. He's the lead analyst over at Arrowhead Pride Radio. Before we get to our mailbag questions, it's time for Pete's 3 things to watch ahead of the Chiefs and Buccaneers at Arrowhead Stadium on Monday Night Football. Kansas City taking their perfect 7-0 record into this game. So first thing to watch here, probably the running game. We brought up power, the way this team likes to play, when they get ahead, what Andy Reid likes to do. Is Kareem Hunt a guy that you feel like should still be getting around 20 touches a week?
Yeah, I tend to think he will in this game, and I think it's what's making the offense tick right now. If there's one thing that maybe has been most impressive about this year, it has been Andy Reid taking the cards he's been dealt and figuring out ways to maximize them. And even though now DeAndre is going to be expanded, I still tend to think that you're going to see Kareem quite a bit in this game, and Kareem has been good. You know, if you look at some of the analytics, I know people will argue that he's a little bit under yards over expectation, but I just tend to think because the Chiefs are more apt with some of the Buccaneers' injuries we mentioned with Ron at the cornerback position, we had mentioned just the fact that they've been de-weaponized in a sense, right? I think their best weapon right now is the tight end, which actually doesn't stack up well for the Chiefs if you're thinking about it. But, I think the Chiefs will have this game handled, which lends you to think, okay, why would that change at this point? Now, maybe later in the season, as you start to get some of these guys back, you won't see Kareem touching the football. I think especially when Pacheco comes back, I think it'll be 1-2, that type of thing, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to say, who's 1A, who's 1B. I don't think it really matters. But, again, right now, I think the offense runs through Kareem, and I don't see that changing on Monday night.
Now, in the passing game, Andy Reid talked about DeAndre Hopkins getting more involved, so you're going to see more than 23 snaps. And we also talked about Xavier Worthy and just having him as a threat out there. Do you see in this game, I mean, Ron said you could expect a 40-point showing in this one. Is the deep ball going to be coming back on Monday night?
Yeah, it's kind of something that I've been teasing the whole show, and that's why I asked Ron about it. I'm glad he agreed. This is the guy that is living and breathing Chiefs film. It's just this idea that DeAndre's role, snap-wise, is going to expand every week, seemingly. And he already had 23 snaps last week. You would think that now he can have in the range of 30, 35, 40. And when you're talking about that, you're talking about real legitimate threats in that middle intermediate, whether it be Travis Kelce or DeAndre. Maybe you run the football. Who do you defend at that point? It's just really tough. And then what that'll do is Todd Bowles adjusts and maybe does have a play or two or a look where you leave Xavier Worthy one-on-one. He beats his man, and I'm expecting a long Worthy touchdown at some point in this game. And I think as the Chiefs continue to build and build and build their identity of being this methodical team, you'll start to see more of those again. The NFL is so cyclical, right, where it seemed like the whole league adjusts to what Patrick Mahomes was doing. Now, 2 years later, Patrick Mahomes is really, again, numbers aside, performing well in the intermediate and doing enough things and having enough success there, working their way down the field, that I think at some point here it'll adjust back, and that's when you'll start to see some of these passes again. It's a real shame that Hollywood Brown is not available on this team, because I think you'd see it even more if they had that personnel, but they just simply don't.
Now you expect a big touchdown from Worthy. Does DeAndre Hopkins get his first touchdown on Monday night?
It's hard to tell with this team. Andy Reid is sometimes, to the chagrin of Chiefs fans, really creative in the red zone. So I could say, it's not what you're about to see tonight in a few minutes, where Aaron Rodgers is constantly looking for Devontae Adams every single time. You might think, now DeAndre is going to run a certain route or something like that, and maybe even look like he's open or even have a step. And then it's like, nope, just kidding. Shovel pass to Jared Wiley, touchdown, right? Which is so hard to bet, like these anytime touchdowns for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And so I'll back up in saying that I think DeAndre's going to have a touchdown, but I do think he'll be much more involved than last week, yeah.
And lastly, for this third thing to watch, Josh Uche and maybe his debut on Monday night. How do you expect the defense to look? Is this going to be a defense that gets even better? How much can we expect from Uche? What are you going to look for here going against Tampa Bay?
Yeah, we're always talking about Andy Reid's playbook and how complex it is and how tough it is to absorb it and have a role. And you could say the same thing to an extent about Spagnuolo's. And so I think Uche plays. I think it's real rotational at the beginning. I think more so on third downs, but it's going to be fun to watch. You just watch a few clips of this guy. I put one on my X account or Twitter, and you could easily go to YouTube, and there's plenty of videos to watch. It's a different type of player, man, and I'm eager to see when he does come on the field. I tend to think to start it's going to be these 3rd and 8, 3rd and 6 or longer type of situations, and who knows, right? The ends on this team have the benefit of Big Daddy Chris Jones, and he's always eating up bodies to leave these guys one-on-one. Maybe Uche gets home in his debut.
All right, let's move on to our mailbag questions. And if you ever want to be involved on it here on this show, you can look for Pete's tweet on X, or you can use our text line at 913-912-4810. That's 913-912-4810. Question number 1, when do you think Isaiah Pacheco will be back? And is Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the trading block, or which running back is out once Pacheco returns?
Yeah, I think that the way this lineup is built, you have a clear role for Kareem Hunt when Pacheco gets back. Now, I'm not saying that Pacheco's not going to is going to be the running back too. I actually anticipate Pacheco to be the one, and then Kareem to end up being that change of pace. Which at that point, you're talking maybe a month from now, a couple weeks. He'll have 150, 160 carries to his name. I'm sure it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to ease off him a little bit. And so when he re-enters, I tend to think, remember, originally, Carson Steele was billed as like a fullback, not necessarily the one getting a lot of carries. Whereas Pirine, I think Kareem fits into that role, so you wonder if that's where they go. And who knows here? I think all 4 backs are capable, and that's why you still see Clyde Edwards-Helaire around, right? Like we had that year where you're wondering, Ronald Jones is still on this team? Like, what is he doing? Because these guys go down, and we saw it with Pacheco, and so you want to keep those guys around. But hard to really determine what this is going to look like, but I tend to think when Pacheco is back, when he's ready to go, when he's a full go, he's your 1A, and then Hunt will be your 1B.
Question number 2, when do you think Juju comes back, and what will his role be?
Yeah, the Chiefs didn't put Juju on the IR, and if you backtrack the math, because the IR rule is you have to miss 4 games, and it's a helpful tool because you want to be able to use that roster spot and not have to worry, and they didn't put him on IR. I think that they probably said to him, look, be ready for the Buffalo game. Take your time. We're going to be okay. Again, this is never stuff that they would say at the podium, but probably internally they're like, it's the Bucks and it's the Broncos. We're okay. We can win these games. We're going to need you for this Buffalo game, and I would think that that's the target date. It's at least a target date because they would have put him on IR if they didn't think that there was a possibility there. So I'm aiming for that. I think he'll be active against Buffalo.
Question number 3.
Yeah.
Legitimately, the coaching staff sees how bad Bolton is in pursuit and in coverage. The run defense is so good, and the play caller overcomes a ton of talent issues, but there's no way he takes money from Trey Smith's contract next year, right?
Love Chiefs fans. Already worried about next offseason. You got to love it. The Chiefs like Bolton. I know not every fan does. Really, really nice guy. One of the most polarizing Chiefs that is on the roster right now. I think a lot of people want to see the Chiefs move on. I actually think, and I'm not making an opinion here based upon my evaluation or anything like that. I think it's Bolton before Trey Smith. I think similar when the Chiefs, and there was all this debate about do they keep Snead, do they keep Jones, is there a way to keep both? They ended up only being able to keep Jones and making a move for Snead. I think there was an either or that happened when it was either Creed or Trey. And I think they got a deal done with Creed. It's tough to have all these new deals for offensive linemen, and the Chiefs have been pretty good with drafting offensive linemen and playing as rookies. I know it didn't really work out at the beginning of this season with Suamata Ia, but they tend to have this knack for finding guys. So I love Trey Smith. I love watching Trey Smith. He's great with us at the media, but that's how the NFL is built. You have to make hard cuts, and I think they see Nick Bolton as one of these glue guys. I know that he has his laps in coverages. I'm not denying that, but behind the scenes, I think they see him as an extension of Steve Spagnuolo's brilliant mind on the field and getting guys into position, reading opposing offenses, so on and so forth. And so I think they would probably lean Bolton, but you never know. I could be wrong about that, and they go the other way.
Question number 4, last two here. How realistic is it that Hollywood Brown will be back late in the season or postseason?
Yeah, I think everyone is looking for a definitive answer on Hollywood Brown, and unfortunately, that's not how the human body works, especially in this really rare injury where his literal clavicle needs to get back into place. And so I think even the team will have a little bit better of an idea late November, early December. I think, based upon the conversations that I've had with folks, I think at some point in December, you see maybe mid to late, you see the return to play where he's able to practice, but maybe really no intention of putting in that game. Hell, the Chiefs keep winning. They may not need week 17, let alone week 18. So why would you even put him in the game at that point? But I think he's back sometime mid to late December, and then you see him for right now what would be the first divisional round game if you're assuming that the Chiefs were to clinch that bye. And they have a lot of tiebreakers and a lot of games on teams. So I don't even think that's too outlandish to say right now.
And lastly here, why does Veach draft so much better on day 3 than he does day 1?
It's very impressive day 3, and I think he has a great team in place to identify raw traits that have seemed to hit, and they are outstanding on day 3. Day 1, you're talking about Xavier Worthy, you're talking about Karlaftis, Trent McDuffie. You want to talk about Felix? Okay, those number 32 picks where they're taking Clyde, they're taking Felix. It could easily be the second round. A lot of times they're trading down in that spot. This was the regime before Veach with John Dorsey. If you remember that pick, they ended up trading into the second round. Chris Jones would have been a slam dunk pick in that round. So, and again, I know that was the regime before, but Veach was under Dorsey at the time. And so, yeah, I think it's a little overblown. I think he's had his hits. I think Trent McDuffie looks like one of the best first-round picks maybe in Kansas City Chiefs history. And sure, you're going to hit and miss on these picks, but it's hard to describe. You get a lot more shots, too, on day 3. It's not like every single day 3 pick has worked. You just remember the ones that have because they've been really impressive.
All right, Pete. Well, great stuff as always. It'll be Chiefs and Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. Kansas City will take their perfect record into that game at Arrowhead Stadium. After that, a matchup with the Denver Broncos, and then that showdown against Buffalo in Orchard Park. So that's going to do it for another edition of Arrowhead Pride Radio on Sports Radio 810 WHB. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. That's Pete Sweeney. Kyle Collier produced this thing.
Yeah, thank you for listening to Arrowhead Pride Radio. Of course, brought to you by Heartland Financial and Mortgage. Putting people first. Check them out at hfmkc.com. Stay safe on this Halloween. You too, Jack.
Absolutely.
No egging. No egging houses.
Definitely won't be too old to do that now.
All
But
right,
missed any part of our show, check it out on the podcast page. But until next week, you take it easy, Kansas City.
This has been another edition of Arrowhead Pride Radio. For much more, head to arrowheadpride.com and follow at Arrowhead Pride on social media.